Great. So thank you everyone for joining. We are going to talk today about team together even when we're apart, because for most of us around the world right now, we're all working in our own zones. You can see my lounge behind me. And so we're going to talk about how we can just do this a little bit better. This session is going to be 30 minutes. It's an interactive 30 minutes, so we'll get you involved. And then we'll have a Q&A at the end for those who can stay. It'll be about 10, 15 minutes of questions. And you'll notice that in the bottom right-hand corner, near where you were putting your flags in and where you can chat, there's an area to put your questions in. So as we're going, pop your questions in. And if you don't have one, you can always vote someone else's up. And that would, we'll do the ones that have risen to the top first. And no, you cannot vote them down, but you can vote them up. So let's get started. If you're like me and Patty and Andrew, you're working from home. And working from home isn't always exactly as we expected. So this is our colleague Anna, and that's her daughter who has now taken over her work from home office space. So it isn't always easy. And we just wanted to check how many of us are working from home and how long we've been working home for. So also next to the chat, there's a little area where it says polls, and there's a little red circle next to it that you can see. So some people I can see have already jumped in. Can you have a go, please, at telling us on the poll how long you've been working from home? And you can see as it evolves. So it's a live vote as people are voting. You can see the line moving. Nobody is not working from home so far. So
That's
essentially, sorry, Andrew, I talked over. What did you say?
That's quite good. That most people have moved to working from home.
It is. It's good for the world. Not always good for our own sanity. But basically, the bars are, as you can see, a few weeks and feels like forever. I'm definitely in the few weeks camp. I've also been working from home for a few weeks. And probably like me, you've been getting it's a ton of chat, social chat from friends and family. They keep sending me videos and pictures, and I wanted to refer to them to give us some insight into what it's like working from home. I know that's not what they're intended, but actually the memes are really appropriate. So looking at the first one, we can feel distant. You can feel like the Beatles that have been broken up, and some of our band members, our team, are just away out in the distance, not where they're meant to be. But as the Beatles sing, we get by with a little help from each other or our friends, or in this case, our teammates. And together we can make this better. The second meme, it cracks me up as a runner. People do not know how to keep their distance in the parks, but we are learning. And that just shows us teams how we are getting it wrong sometimes, but we are on a journey to getting it right. And every day that I get out there running, it's more and more right. The next one is about rules. And even though I hate rules, there are rules to business, and it's a safe space. We know how to work. This new way of working, it's just a big unknown for a lot of us. But in time, rituals and patterns will evolve. And in fact, some rituals and patterns are already evolving, and they're not great. So we need to start to form some better habits. You've probably seen this video of Jen on Zoom. Now, we all love Jen, and some can empathize, but you really shouldn't be going to the bathroom during a Zoom call. And when you get caught and it goes viral worldwide, it's just reinforcement that as teams, we can be doing better sometimes. So, hi, I'm Lori. And you sort of, if you were early on the call at least, met my colleagues Andrew and Patsy. We're going to take you through how you can be a better team together, even when virtual. And I'm just going to remind you again, in case anyone's just joined, to please pop your questions in the Q&A area at the bottom right and vote up other people's questions. Over to you, Andrew.
So across the team, you have Laurie, who's based in London but is Canadian. I'm South African and based in New Jersey. And Patty is our New Yorker based in New York. And I've got that right, Patty?
That is absolutely right. Although I was born in Philadelphia, so I'm a little misplaced, but I'm happy to call myself a New Yorker now.
So we are Oxford SM. We're a global agency with 100 people working around the world, all working virtually. And we've been working virtually since we were founded in 1987. So for over 30 years, we've been working like this. I would say right now, with the virus, this is unprecedented. And so even though we work virtually, we also have some challenges. Kids from home, schools being off, it's just completely different to anything we've done. But we've got a lot of advice and some very practical tips to share today from what has made it work for us over the last 30 years. And one of the things we want to start off saying is it's possible to do this really well. We ran last week a brand week for Sanofi, where we had 400 people all working virtually and collaborating for over 4 days. And this is the feedback we got at the end. So being virtual doesn't mean that it's going to be a compromise. You can actually deliver great engagement, great sessions, great strategy workshops done virtually. And this is testimony to that. So we want to go over to you guys, and in the chat, we'd like to see how you're doing. Are you saying, we've got this, we're on top of it? Are you trying to make sure it works, but you're not sure? Or are you completely out of sorts? Would just be very good in the chat just to see where people are at right now with this virtual working. Have you got this? Are you trying to make it work? Or are you totally out of sorts? I'm looking out for any other feedback. Good, not great. A totally out of sorts face, work in progress. Yeah, it varies. Trying to make it work. I think that's fair. Trying to make it work. And
Fingers
some
crossed.
straight faces. Yeah, trying to make it work. And that's not surprising. It's still early days for most people who haven't done this. Let me reassure you, every week there'll be days when we'll say at Oxford, we've got this, and then in the same week we'll be going, oh my goodness, we got that wrong. So you'll have ups and downs and have highs and lows. So we'll go through and we'll be sharing some tips now on the things that we help to mostly get you into the we've got this. Struggling with the amount of screen time, I completely agree with that, Bonnie. That is one of the challenges. So yeah, thank you. So we're going to share 5 things today. There's room for all of us to improve. And I'd say even at Oxford, we find ourselves coming back to these practical tips on an ongoing basis. So if you don't mind, Patty, moving on.
Yes, thanks, Andrea.
Yep. So 5 things. If we move on, here they are. The 5 things are passion for human connection, a leader who is engaged and motivates, a space with meaning and impact, focused jobs to be done, and a culture which is open and safe. And this is based on research we've done, and we've taken, inspiration and learning from the Harvard Dream Model, from the Deci and Ryan self-determination theory, as well as from people like Martin Seligman's PERMA model. But we've also been very practical about this, and we've spoken to a lot of companies about how they're dealing with this. Companies like Google, companies like ESPN and the NBA to define these 5. And the first one is a passion for human connection. And what we mean by this is getting to know each other's individual interests and passions. And this is really important. And there's some evidence behind why this is so important, because highly engaged and connected teams outperform those who aren't connected. And the evidence is across both customer satisfaction, which is significantly increased, your employee retention, which is increased, and then what a lot of people are asking about is, what's the impact on growth? So engaged, connected teams during and while we're working virtually is critical. So here's some tips on how you would actually build those connections virtually. The first one is what we call just one-to-one working and coffee chats. And what we mean by that is it's calling each other up, grabbing a cup of coffee, having a conversation. It's not about work. And in fact, this is really important because so much of what you'll be getting in emails and in correspondence will be about work. But stopping to say, I'm phoning somebody up to check in with them as a friend and just chatting about life and how things are going, critical. So that's number 1. The second one is connecting as a team and checking in. And this is deliberately different from the other one, which is about individual. This is about team check-ins. And it's purely social. So we use various forms for this, especially WhatsApp we do. in order to share. And so Patty and I, we haven't seen each other in a couple of months, but she knows everything about what's going on with, my son's hockey, and I know the same about her kids' hockey. But we haven't talked to each other, in person. It's all been virtual, and we've been checking in as teams to make this happen, and it helps us to feel much closer. The third one is how we co-create. And we use a very simple mechanic. We call it team brain. Every time we want to brainstorm or learn something new and share, we pop an email out to the Oxford Community of 100, and we call the subject is Team Brain, and we say to the community, what can you help us with, or who has done something similar on? And that's how we approached this webinar. We sent the note out saying to people, what advice would you give others about the way we work? And what we've come back with was largely from a team brain for practical advice. The fourth one is about connecting with buddies and mentors. Now, this is really interesting. It's slightly different from the coffee chat in that for everyone in our 100, we have allocated a buddy or a mentor. So it's formal, but it's done very informally. And we use it as a way to check in once, maybe twice a month, to see that everything's on track and where those people need help. So those are the 4 areas that we would do to help stay connected. And I'm interested if you could go into the poll. So again, on the bar on the bottom, you can click on the poll. We'd love to know which one of those you're interested in trying. Might be all 4, but in particular, which one of those resonated most with you for things you could be doing with your teams. And if you see on the poll, if you scroll down, we've answered the one poll, and if you scroll down, you should be getting down to the second poll. Patty, can you bring that up? I don't think it's coming up.
Sometimes it takes a second. This is the glory of working virtually.
Hang on a sec.
Well, it's the glory of working virtually, and everyone's bandwidth's being under pressure right now.
It should be up there now, Andrew.
Yeah. So if you guys don't mind, scrolling down, and you'll see, is it a virtual coffee chat, one-on-one? Is it a team brain, team check-in, or having that formal, informal, virtual buddy and mentor? Or as I said yesterday in a meeting, a muddy. It's there. It's there if you scroll, yeah. Thank you, guys.
Obviously, we all just want another excuse to have a cappuccino, clearly.
Exactly. It's there.
Very good for my client.
So it's very interesting. The virtual coffee chat seems to be getting the most votes, which makes sense. I think at a time when we could all be so business focused and so task orientated, I think there is a tendency to maybe overdo the business sharing. And we would say, from having done this for 30 years, not having those coffee chats and check-ins is done at your detriment. So we'd encourage that. And good to see that there's a fair amount on the team brain and the check-in.
And Vanessa, hats off to you for finding the typo in the poll. Thank you. Muddy, it meant to be buddy, not muddy. So thank you for that. We are going to adopt that term here at Oxford soon.
And Julie, good to see you already doing coffee chats and team happy hours. And I think you're absolutely right. It works great. So we would encourage you to do more of that and get the balance right between that and business. So Patty, handing over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. I do want to remind people, you can ask a question. I see there's one in there about my office. This is typically where I work at home, but this morning I've had to commandeer it for my husband, so I'm very thankful that I'm in this room. But if you do have a question, please pop it in there, and as Laurie said at the beginning, we'll address them at the end. So the second area is really about leadership. And what we've found working virtually for over 30 years is that it's critical that our leaders set the objective for the team, but remain incredibly flexible to let the team get on with it and get it done in a way that works for them. And actually, you really need to shift your leadership style when you're working virtually. You need to move from directing the team to really enabling the team. And there's a wonderful book that most of us here at Oxford have read called Team of Teams. And it speaks to this example live, based on a military example. But it's got a lot of inspiration of proof about how important this is. So here are some of the practical tips that our leaders have done and learned over the last 30 years on how you can lead virtually. So it's incredibly powerful. Our leadership team once a month holds something called a Community Connect. All 100 of us get together for about an hour. It's an update on the business, and it really helps people feel connected to what's going on at Oxford. The second thing is our leadership team has worked with a coach, and the coach really encourages asking question versus telling. There's a model called the GROW model, and the questions are around defining your goal, your reality of where you are today, the options going forward, but most importantly, what are you going to go do, and what's your way forward? We also use silent cues like thumbs up to agree with virtual comments that are being made. This is incredibly important when you're working virtually because some people can feel unsure when they're just talking with no direct body language or physical feedback. We also listen incredibly deeply. I don't know whether you've ever tried to listen for 5 minutes. I actually made Lori do it the other day on a call, and I think it was very difficult for her because
brutal.
She is our chatterbox, our complete chatterbox. But if you actually listen for a full 5 minutes, you do two things. One, you show the other person on the line that you really care. And secondly, as a leader, I bet you'd be more focused on really the key things that that person wants you to know.
Patty, it was worth it.
Thank you. I know it was hard, but thank you for doing it, Laurie. It was worth it to me too. So the last thing we do is called a happiness survey. And we ask everybody at Oxford one simple question once a month. How do you feel about working for Oxford? And generally, we get pretty good scores. But sometimes when we don't, we take the time to understand why, reflect, and course correct as needed. So those are some of the things that we've learned over the last 30 years, or our leaders have learned over the last 30 years, to really enable a team and motivate a team when you're working virtually. I want to go into the chat again and ask you all if you might think about one thing that your leader or leaders have done to motivate or engage you virtually over the last few weeks. This is new for many of us. Are your leaders shifting their style? And if so, what's one thing your leaders have done? I would love to see if anybody has one simple thing their leader has done. More frequent communication. Anna, thank you. Yes, actually, our leadership has done that as well. So our community connects, which I mentioned just a moment ago, are typically once a month, and now we're doing them every 2 weeks. The leadership team, we've shifted to doing them more frequently. Great, Bonnie, it looks like your leader is asking you what you need and how they can help. So really being a servant leader, some of you may be familiar with that term. More team check-ins, terrific, from Penny. Virtual Friday beers, I love that. We haven't done that yet at Oxford. Maybe we should take that on for tomorrow.
There's a gin and tonic one up above in the chat that I spotted as well. I'm into that one.
Fantastic. Well, because we're global, we might have to have the folks here in the States will have to have mimosas while the guys in Britain are having wine.
And Patty, there's one from Zach about showing vulnerability and being human. I couldn't say more about that because I think that makes a big difference in a virtual environment.
Fantastic. Agrees.
Yeah.
All right. So I am now going to pass it, Lori, back on to you. But thank you for the comments. And one thing to note, this is being recorded. So if there's something that you're finding that's helpful, you can always go back after the broadcast and see what people have said in the different chats. So back over to you, Lori.
Thank you very much. So I'm doing the third area. And the third one is about helping people feel like they're making a difference, that it's really meaningful. In particular, when you're all alone in your own space for days or weeks, it's hard to just walk the office and see what everyone else is doing and see how you're contributing to the bigger picture. So how do we know this is important? We always have one slide per section on why it's important. And it's because when you find meaning in your work, when there's a why, we know that teams perform better. And we've seen it. It was in the Harvard Business Review this morning, but this also came out of a company interview we did with the NBA. So we know that finding meaning in our work is really important. This is how we do it because we will always work this way. So we're going to share some of our tips with you. So the first one is that we have an intranet site, and because of the way we work, we have to go in there every day. And what's lovely is what you see front and center are our latest wins. So even though I don't necessarily work on BA, I still feel great that we've had a nice win. And I feel good for my colleagues who have scored those wins. And then we message each other and say congrats. So this is about shouting out. And it's a nice daily reminder for our team for the meaning beyond just what we're doing. The second thing we do is we go a bit deeper into the big wows, the real success stories where we feel we've made a big difference, and in particular, where it's most meaningful to us because it's our purpose. So, in line with our purpose, we had a team that worked with a soup kitchen and they branded them, helped them to rebrand by working on a nice strategy with them. And what came out of it was a brand called Nourish. And they got a new space, a new name, and also redefined how they're going to help others, which means that through Oxford, we're helping people. And our purpose is to help people thrive. So we really shouted loud and proud about that one. And that gave us all a lot of meaning. The last one I'm going to share with you is our Friday email, which actually recently went from an email to a Vimeo video. And this is Simon doing our video from just last week. He does one every Friday, and it tells us what's going on again, the meaning beyond our own role in the business. He talks about where we're going, what we've done. He talked about the health or lack of health of his family, but that they had gotten better, and how our business is doing even in the face of coronavirus. So it helps me in particular, but helps all of us, I think, to feel like there's more meaning in our work. So again, we want to skip into the polls and have a look at how meaningful our teamwork has been feeling lately. Is it about the same? Is it maybe a little tougher now that we're virtual? Let's see how we're all doing. So I'm going to click on the poll and see how we're voting. Scroll to the bottom. Most are saying the same, a little bit less meaningful. Nobody's more meaningful. I've got to believe somebody's mastered this virtual working. It gives me hope. So, but you know what? About the same, that's a massive achievement. And if we're getting it about the same, and now we're seeing less meaningfuls coming up there as well. Less meaningful, I think that's what I expected. And it is tough. But you can see how some people are still getting the same out of this. It can be done. And I think it's something that doesn't happen naturally. You have to work hard at it. I hope all of these tips help you. We're going to move on to Andrew, who's going to give you some more tips.
So this is the fourth area, and it's about being clear and focused on what jobs need to get done. And honestly, this sounds like it's fairly common sense and straightforward, and isn't that what you should be doing? But you'll be amazed at how easy it is to be distracted or for teams to veer off course when they're not as connected. So it sounds obvious, but it isn't. And we know that when teams fall short, it affects who does what, and the decision making will feel very, very fuzzy. So how do we know this is important? Well, we know that Google has done a lot of work on this, and they know that structure and clarity helps teams to be that much more effective. And for those of you who don't know, Google Rework is a very interesting place to take a look. It's a platform where they share insight and case studies based on all their research and all their work on how this works well. So there's a body of evidence here that confirms this. And if we look at some practical tips on how to get this done, we know that project planning is even more important than it would be under normal circumstances. And so this is how we take it on. This is how we challenge it. When a project starts in Oxford, before we start jumping into the task, we start off by clarifying what the challenge is. What exactly is the value add or the brief that we're all working towards? And we spend quite a lot of time on that, and we contract with each other about how we're going to do that. Then we talk about the roles and responsibilities, and then we prioritize who does what. And that's how we approach all projects. And honestly, when we haven't done that, we've usually had wobbles. When we finished a project, we talk about what worked well and what would be even better if. And when we actually do follow that discipline, let me be honest, we try to do that all the time. We don't always get that done. But when we do, things go so much more smoothly because people know what they need to do by when, and it works really well. The next thing is we prioritize virtually, and we happen to use Microsoft Teams as our platform. And one of the features that we find really helpful is the Kanban. And it's a very simple, visual, transparent way of saying, what are we working on? What has to be done in true Kanban and agile working fashion? What are we doing? And what has been completed? And that's a very nice mechanic for prioritizing and staying focused when in a virtual environment. One of the things we see happening quite a lot in a virtual network is circling and detouring. Again, it's so easy to get distracted. And one of the ways to actually help check ourselves is we use GIFs and emojis to share in chat and correspondence to say, let's catch up later with that, or let's pick that up another time, or let's move on. And it's very helpful and a very respectful way of being able to move something on so you can avoid distraction and detours and circling. So in the chat, as we've been doing, we'd love to know if there's things you've done to keep your team focused. If there was one thing that you've seen work really well to keep your team focused, what would it be? And we'd love to see you pop that into the chat.
Just yesterday, Andrew, I was talking to a client about, he was struggling with back-to-back virtual meetings. And we agreed to make them 45 minutes because then you get 15 minutes at the end just to gather your thoughts, to focus on what's coming next, or even get a cup of coffee.
And I see Mary asking a question about maintaining audience engagement. One of the things that works really well is what Patty mentioned earlier, is by listening. So we will go around the virtual room and we'll make sure everybody gets a chance to be heard. And you'll be amazed when you listen to people and give them a chance to be heard, engagement is incredibly high. You don't need to have, cheap tactics to do that. Just listening gets engagement, and we take that very seriously. I'm looking at this as well. There's some regular check-ins to keep ourselves focused. That makes a really big difference. Regular check-ins helps. And prioritized initiatives that are thoughtful to our key stakeholders. I think that that's right too. I'm busy looking out for a few more things that might pop up before I hand over to you, Patty. And let me check, Patty, while I'm doing that, are we on track?
Actually, Andrew, I think we should keep going. And if people have questions, please pop them and ask a question and we can come back to them at the end.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. So our last one is about creating a virtual culture. And as you can imagine, having done this for 30 years, we've done some things right and not done some things right, but we've got a lot of experience here. And we recognize how difficult it is to maintain and create a culture when you're not physically together. So we know that changing culture really changes results. And normally we would say when people thrive, business thrive. We're conscious of the fact of the state of the world these days, and we know right now it's about helping teams just be a little bit better. Amy Edmondson out of Harvard talks about the notion of a psychologically safe workplace. And this is really a place that you can come to work and be yourself. And I've actually worked for Oxford for about 10 years. And from day one, it's been like that. There's no fear of embarrassment. There's no fear of being put down. I can come to work every day and just be Patty. It doesn't mean that we're nice to appease people. Please know we have debates, we disagree, we agree to disagree, and we move on. We call it caring candor, and we fundamentally believe that it helps each individual and, more importantly, our teams be their best. So here's some of the practical tips that we've learned about creating virtual culture. First of all, we really think of the notion of typing in our chat what we think. We say what we think, we say it openly, and again, there's no downside to doing this. And I think earlier, Andrew, in the webinar, used the terms even better if. That's something that we use a lot to take an idea and build on it and how we can be even better. We also work as a group of equals. We are adults, we treat each other that way, and every voice counts. And if we're in a meeting and you need to go take care of something, we put BRB or be right back in the chat. You leave and you come back and resume where you were before. We're also incredibly conscious about the fact that when you work virtually, it's really difficult to see body language. And as we all know, body language is a critical part of communicating with others and being a part of teams. We've all been in that meeting room where you see someone's arms crossed like this, and we simply don't have that virtually. So a lot of times we check in more frequently and we ask if people are okay. And more importantly, it's okay for us to say to each other, I'm not okay. I'm having a really difficult day. For example, Anna and I were talking this morning and she had to kind of commandeer her office back because her kids were learning at school. So it's an environment where we can absolutely do that. The last thing is sometimes you might read a comment virtually that you're not really sure of. And here at Oxford, we always assume positive intent and we lean in to talk about it with the person who's said it virtually so we can understand what they really, really mean. We also ensure everyone has an equal voice. Here's Andrew with his hands up. Andrew. And we really make a point of going around and listening to people active in the conversation. It does take a little bit more time, but we've found virtually it's a critical component to protecting and fostering the culture. We also value different learning styles, points of view, and ways of working. For example, on our leadership team, we take extra time and build-in time for the introverts or reflective thinkers, if you will, to think through in a meeting. And they often present back and share their views at the end of the day after they've had time to think and reflect. It's subtle changes in ways of working that really help virtual cultures come together and to remain together. And I'm sure all of you in the last 2 weeks have been on a virtual conversation or whatever it is, and it's gone on and on and on. Well, we bring back our childhood friend Elmo, and we ask everyone, we say, everyone, let's move on. And we ask people to, or Lori says, enough, let's move on. She and I debate this. But anyway, the important part is when you're in a conversation and it's just not moving on, feel the freedom to do that. And on that note, I'm going to ask Elmo to come out and turn it back over to Lori.
Yeah, that's enough, Patsy. No, so that's it. That's where we're at. Those are our 5 things that we can share with you after 30 years of learning by getting it wrong to get it right. And we don't always get it right. But these are our 5 things that help us to be better as teams. And we actually believe that if we work better together at home now when it's really difficult, then there could be a silver lining in all of this. I'm always an optimist. And that is that perhaps we'll be able to work better together when we're no longer at home. And the reason that is because now as colleagues or as people I know, some of you and people I've never met before, you can see what my lounge looks like. You're seeing Patty's photos on her walls. Maybe it's the way your pet reacts when you're working. But actually what you're doing is you're sharing your whole self and you're being yourself. And we hope that if we all carry on like this a little bit more, then even when we're back at the office, and help me please, I hope we are one day, it'll make for better teamwork for all of us. So our very last poll is to ask you to commit a little bit to some action, because we know that if you want to be better, it has to start now. Which of these 5 is an area where you personally feel that you might be able to do something differently starting tomorrow to help to create a better culture, an atmosphere, a more engaging environment for your team? So let's have a look at our poll and see how we're doing. Again, go to the very bottom. Human connection and being more clear and focused. I think human connection for sure is such an important one because it's about feeling disconnected really when you're on your own, but also clarity, because it's that too, isn't it? It's working together as people and working to deliver an outcome and the business, and more clarity will help that. So thank you very much for your polls. Thank you for all of your interaction. We're actually going to skip now to our Q&A, which we're going to have a look at which our most popular questions were. Patsy, do you want to pick our first question?
I would love to do that. So the question is, should we start the day, the one that got the most votes, should we start the day with a team coffee? It provides structure, but have you found it to be too rigid? Andrew, do you want to take that on, or?
That's a challenging one. I think when you say start the day with a team coffee, I think I would love to do that, but I also find that there's often a better time of the day to do that. The morning I end up trying to just get a couple of things actioned, and it's usually the crazy time of the day, particularly right now with having children at home, not from school. So I don't know if you'd start the day with that, or whether it's something where you'd say just find a time during the day to make that connection. And I think that's probably more helpful rather than saying it's a fixed time, which feels a little bit too rigid.
I agree, because also if I want to have coffee with Andrew or Patty, it has to be in the afternoon.
Time zone difference.
I've got a time zone to deal with. But we all have, and the nice thing is if you connect as humans, people get to know you and you're totally yourself, you'll know as a team when a good time is, actually, and you go with the flow.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Let's take one more. One of the things I did want to mention before we do that is After the webinar, all of you will be receiving an email, and you'll be able to download, because we covered all of this in just 30 minutes, and we want to be conscious that we have about 6 or 7 minutes left to do the Q&A. But all of you will be receiving an email, and on that, you can download a one-pager, which will capture the 20 practical tips to working virtually that we've shared with you on this call. So let's go to the next question, which is from Jonathan. How do we avoid Zoom exhaustion or exhaustion? I assume
like
Zoom
exhaustion, I think. I'm just going to shout out that that's our chairman, actually, Jonathan. And it's a very good question because it can be exhausting. And that's exactly what I was talking to someone about yesterday. It's the constant back to back. And I do think giving yourself a break is fine. And actually, you don't have to say yes to every meeting you're invited to. And sometimes at the beginning of a meeting, I will just honestly say, I have been back to back in 3 calls. Why don't you guys start without me? I'm just going to go take 5 minutes for me. And everyone knows what that is. You don't have to explain what you're doing. It's, that's your time. What do you think, Patsy?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's I think one of the biggest challenges for me is creating what I'll call physical natural pauses in the day when we do virtual. So when you're in a physical office or you're not working virtually, you have the chance to walk the hall from one meeting to the next meeting. And I'm very conscious that even of ending meetings just a couple minutes early so I can get up and stretch or move my body. And I think what we've learned at Oxford is that physical movement. We do this in our workshops where we get people up. We call them energizers, and we get them up throughout the day. That really helps both the mind and the body not get exhausted. And I think those are things that we do at Oxford a lot. We do, I'm going to get a cup of tea. In fact, Laurie, you did it right before the session. And I think being mindful of that when you're working virtually is critical.
I'm standing because another one is standing up, actually. And we use a lot of stand-up desks. And I think Rich Saunders actually has a treadmill desk. He actually walks while talking.
Actually, right next to me is my husband's stand-up desk, so he does that as well. He has one in the office at work, and he does it here as well. So let's do one more question.
I'd love to look at the one from Bonnie Marsden about how do you find satisfaction when work is changing so quickly with the virus and something you did yesterday may be redundant the next day? I think that's a big psychological question. And I'm interested, Patty, and you and Laurie, in terms of your response to that. It's a very real one.
It's, at least for me, someone said, I was on a call the other day, and someone said, when we're moving this fast and people are changing so quickly, they're really focused on 2 things. One is being here now. And secondly, is valuing every experience that we're having as a learning experience and not being too critical of whether something was worth it or not. And we talk a lot about this when we do experience journeys and thinking about how clients really reflect in the moment. And sometimes you don't get it right, and sometimes work was unnecessary. But we always kind of go back and reflect, what did I learn out of that? And whether it's good or bad, I think we always, or at least my time at Oxford, we've always valued the learning in addition to the doing. And I think that's, at least for me, the couple things I've been focused on.
That's a good answer. I'd say in addition to that, we work agile. And I know that's a big buzzword. And I have to say, we kind of scrub it for us and we do our own version that works for us. But what it means is as things are constantly shifting around us, we'll say when this is a 60% solution or it's a minimum viable product or it's not completely thought through yet, but I want to share it with people to get their early input. And that, even just using the word agile, it gives you that ability to work in a shifting environment because people know that things might change day to day. We shared something today and we agreed something as a leadership team. And then at the end, we said, we're going to revisit this in 2 weeks because things are changing so fast. And I think sometimes we just have to trust people as adults that the people we work with will understand as long as we maybe bring it up, and as leaders, the more we can lead by doing that, the better it is.
To be fair, one of the things I think we do, which is important, just talking practically, it comes back to one of the points we shared earlier, is when you have those good news stories, like the soup kitchen and the work we did for them, actually sharing that helps to bring meaning to us as a community, even if some of the work that I might be working on has changed overnight. And I think kind of remembering that as a community, sharing what we've all contributed to can offset, some of the things that have just suddenly disappeared or changed overnight.
Andrew, I'm going to actually wrap up the questioning because we've got a couple more minutes left. And we've got 2 more slides to share. And then again, this is being recorded. So if you want to go back on and look at some of the chat, and we can easily kind of summarize some key takeaways as well. So Laurie, back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Patty. So essentially my job is just to say thank you, which is the best job of all. So thank you very much for joining us. We're Oxford, and as many of you know, we're all about helping to create environments where people thrive, and that's why we wanted to do this today. We know and we can feel how hard it is to thrive at the moment, and just getting by is probably good enough right now. But we believe this is a long-lasting purpose, and the time will come again when actually we all can thrive, properly thrive. So for now, we hope this helps you to work a little bit better and have better conversations, be more open, create a better culture, find more meaning. And we are going to run this again. So if there's any feedback, you can give it to us directly, or let us know. And if there's someone you know, please invite them. It'll be Monday at 8. And in particular, people who can't normally afford consultants, or a not-for-profit organization, an individual, anyone you want, you can invite. So we'll do it at 8. So that's a little bit better for Asia on Monday, and we're always happy to run it again as well.
And not so good for the United States, because that would not be great. It's 8 London time, which would
You're not getting up at 3 to join me, Patsy?
I'm not going to get up at 3. But if there are other sessions that you'd like in the States, please do reach out, and we're happy to do it.
Okay.
We're going to let you all go. Thank you very much for joining. Laurie and Andrew, thank you so much.
Virtual high five.
See you. Virtual high five.
We'll pick up on the chat. So Penny noted, running virtual sessions. Yes, we'll come back on that. So we'll get back to you, Penny, and we'll share with the team. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Enjoy your day.